Out of Virginia, where police are investigating why the son of a prominent state senator, Creed Deeds, stabbed his father multiple times and then allegedly committed suicide. Police say the two got into a fight, which led to the stabbing. Austin Deeds, Gus, later died of a gunshot wound.
One of the state senator's friends tells CNN that the lawmaker had some concerns about his son, who had been living at home after very recently withdrawing from college.
He was living with his son. The two of them were living together, and that was a conscious choice, as I understood, to try and help his son get back on his feet, to get some stability in his life. And I just know that Creed had made a commitment to his son in that way. And again, I hadn't talked to him specifically about it in the last few months, but I just know it weighed on his mind as a father.
Joining us now to discuss this is psychiatrist and Dr. Gail Salz. Gail, we know that this boy, young man, I should say, had just had a mental evaluation under an emergency custody order. I know we don't know the details of why, but explain to me how this type of thing happens and what that means exactly.
Well, there are different kinds of holds, if you will, and some are more limited than others. So this really just allowed doctors to evaluate him for a maximum of 4 hours. Actually, you can potentially extend that by another few hours. And in that time, he should have been evaluated. If he was deemed to be a true threat to himself or someone else, seriously or eminently, then they technically would be able to look for an involuntary commitment so that they would hold him till there was a bed available, even though at that time there wasn't. And people are often held in emergency rooms for long periods of time if there aren't beds available so that they're not released. But if there wasn't eminently a threat, even if he should have been hospitalized or could have benefited from hospitalization, then he would have to be let go after that time if he wanted to be, because he's over 18. And this is the balance, the very difficult balance between civil liberties, and our feeling that we can't hold people unless there's a certain criteria, and the dangers that can go on sometimes. And I think that we've erred potentially too far on the side of civil liberties, so that things like this do occasionally happen.
What about the frustrations of families who, by the time they get to this point, by the time they're trying to get an adult child into a hospital situation, and then they can't keep them there? I mean, this must be tremendously frustrating for families.
It is, and there is sort of this small zone of a real problem where someone might have, for instance, the early 20s is a time when some serious mental illnesses can occur. I don't know about this young man, but bipolar disorder, schizophrenia often present at that age.
At a time when they're gaining their freedom and getting their independence.
Exactly. And, someone can have a psychosis developing, and you might not know the extent of it, and it may be in development. And of course, then there's the other issue, which is no beds available, which is a major problem in many areas. Why? Because we don't have enough mental health funding at a time when we're increasingly aware that there is need for more treatment and more beds available, more research to be done to look at treatment options. $1.8 billion in funding has been cut across the United States between 2008 and 2012.
Well, he would have been held for potentially days more. He could have been if there were only beds available.
If there was a bed available, it sounds like he would have been admitted, and then he would have gotten treatment.
What's your advice to families, given these challenges here? What's your advice to a family when considering going through with something like this? Because this is aggressive.
Right.
To go out and get an emergency custody order.
Correct. Well, obviously someone understood that they were in a desperate situation. My advice to families is, as early as possible, when you see signs of mental illness, that is the time to get someone into treatment. Whether we're talking about depression, seriously low mood, any discussion of any suicidal thoughts, strange or odd behavior, looking like they're responding to something else that's not there, a very expansive mood, grandiose kinds of statements. I mean, there's sort of a host of things, and certainly involvement with substance use and abuse, because the combination of mental illness and substance use and abuse often is really tragic, actually.
So tragic. We have to deal with this. This is something that we as a society and every family has to deal with.
We absolutely do, and we have to look at how we're going to get some more dollars toward this extremely important area that, to some degree, gets the fewest dollars of all.